This is a wake-up call. Imagine that the majority of people on earth are evil. They're bad. The masses. Let's just say that you had 1,000,000 people on earth. Let's say 900,000 of them were bad. And 100,000 was God's chosen. Well, you spent your lifetime thinking that 666 was evil and had to do with the devil, and it was bad because you watched movies like The Omen, and the Bible told you that 666 was the mark of the beast. Even though earlier in the Bible they tell you that the Lord came in threes. You thought that 666 was evil, it was bad, it had everything to do with the devil, so you outcasted it, you buried it, you spat on it, you didn't want nothing to do with it. It was bad. You were good, 666 was bad, and that's the way everyone lived their lives. Then you wake up one day and you realize that 666 is not only holy, but it's the most sacred resonant frequency on the planet. It actually has to do with God and heaven. Well, you know what? You're the one who believed what you were told. And it was easy to deceive you because you listened to the masses. You know, it's kind of like that yin yang where you got the one little spot of black or white and it's in the middle of the other color. Like you have a little black dot and it's in the middle of all white, or you have a white dot, it's in the middle of all black. God's chosen it's a very small percent of the population. And they already told you that they've been scattered amongst the earth and given different languages. You know, you always hear that saying, I'd rather have 10 lions than 100 sheep. Well, that's why it's the way it is. Because if the 10 lions came together, good would win. That's how close to victory good is. That's why bad has to do everything that they can. They have to use manipulation. They have to lie. They have to use trickery. They have to do things because that's the only way that they can win. Did you ever think that the majority of people were evil, and the only way that evil was, and that bad people were actually doing good on this planet was because they convinced the really good people that everything that they believed in was evil? Did you ever think of that? The moral of the story is that you got to stop listening to what people are telling you, especially if it's what the masses are doing. I just found an asteroid goddess that I've been using in astrology, Pax, the Roman goddess of peace. And I found out that Pax's symbol is actually the Chi Rho. It's actually the P and the X that they tell you is the symbol for Christ. Well, Augustus was using Pax in Rome because he was trying to spread peace among the people because there was a lot of war. And you know what Jesus did? He told everyone that peace is within you. Completely destroyed Rome's plan to use the goddess Pax. And the thing with that is, the message of Jesus was that everything is within you. It's not outside of you. It's within you. Everything is within you. Peace, love, it's all within you. But the system needs you to believe that it's on the outside. They need you to worship idols. They need you to believe that the statue has the power. They need you to believe that the church has the power, that the tree has the power. They need you to believe that everything outside of you has what you need, because then you run to it, you give to it, you work for it, you worship it, you bow to it. But really, the truth is within you, and that's what Jesus was trying to tell you. And that's why they had to get rid of him. He had the power to collapse the government. And his following was starting to grow. You know, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. And in astrology, man, this full moon is going to be really important. I just looked at the chart yesterday. 2 days ago, I was having some visions. I saw spirits playing in the ocean and water. And normally a spirit can walk on earth and, you know, it's not tangible. It's not physical. So it could just walk. But in water, the spirits were actually taking form. They were taking shape. So they were like playing in water because they were actually able to take shape in water and express themselves. And then like the next day I saw an eagle. And I don't see eagles that often. Maybe once or twice a year I'll see an eagle. But this one was really close to me. So that's an omen. Seeing an eagle is a good omen. And then I found out that the transfiguration of Jesus is being celebrated this week. So I'm like, wow, this is really interesting that all of these things are happening right now. You know, and then I looked at the death last week, the deaths of, and death is an 8th house issue. The moon is going to be in the 8th house in Aquarius on the 17th degree on the 9th. And I was thinking about these deaths last week. Malcolm Jamal Warner, Ozzy Osbourne, Hulk Hogan, 720, 722, 724. You know, most people are going to tell you that that's a coincidence. But it's not. It's divine order. And if you add 20, 22, and 24, which are the days of the month that they died on, it equals 66. And I'm sure there's a third 6 in there if you dig for it. But that's divine order. They died on even days that were 2 days apart. 20, 22, and 24. So that's an 8th house issue. The moon's going to be in the 8th house. And not only is the moon going to be in the 8th house in Aquarius on the 17th degree, but it's going to be in opposition to the sun. The sun's going to be on the 17th degree of Leo on the 9th at 3:55 in the morning. The neighboring constellation to Aquarius is Aquila, and its brightest star is Altair. That's the Eagle constellation. I just was telling you guys I saw an eagle yesterday, or 2 days ago. So you have this conjunction that's also going on. That's between Saturn and Neptune, and that's going to be conjunct the Midheaven on the 9th. Mars is going to be conjunct the IC or the Nadir. And there's going to be another conjunction in the, I want to say the 11th house in Cancer between Venus and Jupiter, which is really about an expansion or some type of like growing of love. Now, I know that Cancer represents the mother, it represents home, it rules the 4th house, it's ruled by the moon. So, it's in the 12th house actually. It's in the 12th house. 12th house really has to do with like karma, prisons, rehabilitation centers, hospitals. So if you were thinking about a time to repair your relationship with your parents or your mother or what's going on at home, it's a good time to do that with Venus conjunct Jupiter and Cancer in the 12th house. It's a good time to break addictions, get off drugs, turn your life around. I was just saying about the transfiguration of Jesus being celebrated this week. And a transfiguration is to change. It's to become something different. It's almost like a shapeshifter. It's more than a transformation. You're changing forms, changing shape. Think about it as turning your life around, becoming a completely different person. Altair, the brightest star of Aquila, is conjunct Pluto in the 7th house. So I know from that and the opposition between the sun and the moon that there's going to be a lot of issues within relationships between men and women, boys and girls, husbands and wives, fathers and mothers, parents. There's going to be a lot of issues between couples or manifesting through relationships because of the opposition between the sun and the moon, Pluto being in the 7th house, which rules partnerships and marriages, contractual agreements. And then there's also a square, right? Because there's a square. Mercury is square. I don't have the chart in front of me, but oh wait, maybe I do. Mercury is square. No, Mercury is opposite Pluto. So you have Mercury in the 1st house in Leo, opposite Pluto in the 7th house in Aquarius. So that square represents blockages and obstacles. So I know that there's going to be a block there with communication, right? Communication is going to be off. And in Leo, you know that whether it's the written word or the spoken word, or it's tweeted or it's text, or even if you do some type of video messaging, or you just decide to make a video, you know that if Mercury's in Leo, there's always the possibility there that the conversation could be highly charged with pride, could be prideful, authoritative, fixed. It could be very stubborn, resistant to change. So, and the opposition between the sun and the moon is in the houses of 2 and 8. So you have the sun in the 2nd house and you have the moon in the 8th house. The 8th house rules property and money belonging to other people, wills and legacies, surgeries. The 2nd house is personal possessions, money, basic necessities that are needed for survival. So you have this opposition between man and woman manifesting through Pluto within relationships, having to do with like some type of greed, or like what's mine, what's yours, a fight over resources. Could be divorces, alimony, child support, money's due. 8th house moon, you could be getting kicked out of a property, forced to leave, and then you're fighting back because you think that you have entitlement to it, or maybe something in the house belongs to you. So there's a lot of stuff going on right now. And this chart is actually for the 9th, which is the full moon. So we have 7 more days of this energy. But I'm asking that you guys look at things in a different way because of what I was just telling you about 666. Don't listen to the people that are telling you that 666 is bad. Find out for yourself. Find out for yourself that 666 is actually evil and has to do with the devil. Because it's real easy for 900,000 people to manipulate 100,000 people. It's real easy to look up and say, well, everybody's doing that. Everybody says 666 is evil. Yeah, but you don't realize that everybody that's telling you 666 is evil is because they know that it's actually God. They're afraid of it. That's their downfall. But you know what? The majority can triumph as long as they have the minority believing that what they need and believe in is evil. It's a complete mindfuck. But you have to be open to it. You have to be open to seeing things differently. Now, your life might be going perfectly right now, and you might say, hey, you know what, who cares? But not everybody's is. There's a lot of people struggling right now. There's a lot of people poor right now. There's a lot of people in poverty. There's a lot of Jobs out here right now that are like upstanding, upright, morally good, virtuous people that are still waiting for the boat to come in, man. Like, when's the fortune coming in? When is it my time? So not everybody is, and if you're in that situation, then you got to change something. There was a guy that made a video on YouTube the other day, and he was saying the same shit that everybody always says. 666 is the mark of the beast. And I commented back to this guy and I said, you know what? If you still believe that 666 is the devil and it's evil, you're actually so far away from what is good that you don't even know it. The next day, I won the Pick 5 lottery for $425. You think that was a coincidence? I'm starting to realize that everything that you're telling me is bad and not good for me is actually good and right. Don't listen to the majority. I was reading a book recently written by Dolores Cannon. It's called Jesus and the Essenes. And Dolores Cannon was she was a hypnotist. She was doing hypnosis, or she was a regressionist. So she would regress people back through prior lives so that they could process past life trauma and become current in this life, which something I'm going to talk about that after. I got another point to make after I tell you this, but so that's what they tell you, right? So she was regressing people and taking them one life at a time into their past. And she had a client that she worked with that I think she went through like 24 lives with this person. She regressed through 24 lives. And she finally got to this guy named Sufi. Her client was a female, was in hypnosis. She was regressing her. She regressed her 24 lives back to this guy named Sufi. Through the session, many sessions, they found out that this guy Sufi was an Essene. He lived in Qumran and was a part of the Essene community. And I think he was actually, I don't know if he wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. I don't know if that was his job there to write, but he lived in the community. And he knew Jesus. He lived at the time of Jesus. And he said that Jesus wasn't his name. He said it was Yeshua. 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 That was his name. And I don't think Jesus was born in Qumran, but he ended up going there to learn. He was learning under the masters there, who then sent him away to learn more. And this guy Sufi was there throughout the life of Jesus because Jesus ended up becoming a citizen of Qumran. He was an Essene. He was a part of this very small, secret group of people that lived in the desert. And they had a special diet. They weren't following what was going on in the outside world, which was being ruled by Rome at the time. You know, they weren't, I don't think they ate meat. Like, they were like vegans. They ate fresh fruit, vegetables, stuff like that. So they had a very strict diet. They didn't really have money. They didn't even have money. Everything was like traded or made. They did everything themselves. So he actually was there through the life of Jesus and was there during the crucifixion. And he said that he almost couldn't talk about it. Like, when she was regressing this person, she's like, look, if you can't talk about this stuff, don't talk about it. You know, if it's too hard for you to talk about, just don't even worry about it. Because the person was, she could tell that she was having a difficult time reliving the crucifixion. And so she was asking her questions while she was in hypnosis. She was, like, what's going on? And she was like, well, Jesus is walking down the street right now. He just dropped his cross. It's too heavy for him to carry. So somebody from the crowd had to come out and help him. And she was asking about, like, the overall mood. And she was like, the people were like beside themselves. Like, they were completely sad. They couldn't believe, like, what was happening. They couldn't believe that they were actually crucifying Jesus. Like, he never bothered anybody. He was a good person, full of love. And it was the tradition at the time, because of the holiday, for them to let one prisoner go. So she asked her client, like, who wanted Jesus killed, like, who was behind all of that. And he told her that it was a group that he identified as Sanhedrin, Sanhedrin, Sanhedrin. He said it was really hard to understand the word, but that's what it sounded like. And that was a group of Israeli or Jewish lawmakers within Jewish law. And she was like, well, how did they have that ability with Rome in power? And she's like, well, Rome gave them. That was like one of the only powers that Rome gave them. So they wanted him dead and gave him over to Pontius Pilate for the crucifixion. And so, like I was saying, they had people, they had Barabbas there, who was a known murderer, and they had Jesus, and they presented them both to the crowd, and whoever's name was shouted the loudest, that's who they were going to let go. So they thought for sure that they were going to pick Jesus because he wasn't guilty of anything, and that they were going to convict the murderer. But the crowd actually wanted Barabbas to be free. And she tells, I think, Dolores, who was asking her the questions during the hypnosis, during the session, she's like, well, this group of Jewish lawmakers paid people in the crowd to shout Barabbas' name. So the deck was stacked against Jesus, no matter what. Like, they wanted him dead. That was his destiny. There was no way out of it. They paid people to be in the crowd. So it was rigged. The deck was stacked against him. So, so he was crucified with a thief and a murderer. And again, that's 3, right? They said the Lord comes in 3. 666. And so they killed him. She said that he didn't suffer too much on the cross because he had a way of isolating himself from the pain. So she said he didn't suffer too much. She said that it was really brutal and disgusting, though, and it was just a terrible, terrible scene. And after, she said that his head fell forward, and they knew that once his head dropped, they knew that the spirit left the body. And they said that the spirit, she asked if the spirit left the earth plane right away. And she said no, that it actually went with it. He went with his mother, walked away from the cross with his mother. He was in spirit. She was still in physical form. And she said that the mother didn't know that he was she couldn't see him or feel him, but she felt the presence. She knew that he was with her. And he spent a short time on earth before moving on. But she also said that there was like 100 spirits that came to the earth plane to witness that. And she said it was just really sad. She said that the sky was so dark. It was so dark outside during a time that it should have been light. And she said the only light that you could see was the light in Jesus. That was the only light that was visible. Like, that's how dark it was, that you could only see the light of his soul. And But yeah, I mean, the story, like, I mean, information like that, like this was done, I think, in the 60s. This was like, and the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in the 40s. So we're talking about information that, like, not everybody was privy to or had. Like, and believe me, she said it couldn't have been a lie. It could have, it couldn't have been. It couldn't have been. Couldn't have been made up. And I'm trying to think what else she said about Jesus. I guess I'm talking about this because of the transfiguration this week. But she said that that Jesus was a ninth dimensional spirit. He had ninth dimension to the ninth. He had access to the ninth dimension. He really was what people said he was. And when you have that access, you have the ability to collapse a government. And they knew that. They knew that. You know, it's funny too, because if you ever watch that episode of Rick and Morty, when I don't know, I don't remember exactly what episode it was, but there's a scene where Rick, there was like a whole thing of Ricks, and they were like, they had buttons and dials, and they could he had level 9 access or level 9 clearance, and he said, what could you do with that? And he's like, level 9 access, you can collapse the government with level 9 access. It was just an interesting correlation between the Jesus story and Rick and Morty. So anyway, he was a 9-dimensional spirit with the ability, obviously, to collapse the government, and he could have collapsed the Roman government. And that's really why they killed him, because he was becoming dangerous. You know, when he didn't have a following, they dismissed him as crazy, you know, and said that he was just a radical. But when he had a following, everything changed. So the point that I wanted to make before was that I've been watching Total Recall, and I watched Total Recall like 10 times in the last 2 weeks. And I'm trying to ask myself why I would be watching Total Recall 10 times in the last 2 weeks. And there's a message in there. Now, I was kind of hesitant to even talk about this because it's kind of against what I do. Like, as far as astrology and past life regression. But there's a scene in there where Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's playing Quaid, goes to Quado, who is like the prophet on Mars, and he asks him, like, Quado asks him, like, what do you want, Quaid? And he's like, I want to remember. And Quado is like, well, why? And he's like, because I want to remember, so I want to be myself again. And Quado tells him that it's about what you do. A man is defined by his actions, not his memories. And later he tells him to free Mars. He says to go into the pyramid mines and activate the reactor so that they could put oxygen into the atmosphere and save the planet. And that's what he ended up doing. But it was just really interesting because of all the time that I've spent trying to remember, going into past lives, you know, because they tell you that you have unresolved trauma that you carry with you from lifetime to lifetime. And the only way to resolve that karma is to go back and do a past life regression so that you could come face to face with all your traumas and problems, deal with it, become current, become who you are, like Quaid wanted to remember so he could be himself, get current in this lifetime, and move forward from a point that you left off at in your previous life. But Quado tells him it's not about what you remember, it's not about your memory, it's about what you do, it's about your actions. So it just made me think, like, why am I watching Total Recall so many times? And that was just one of the points in there. But there was a lot of other points. Just the whole, just Arnold Schwarzenegger's character in general. You know, like he goes into the recall place, and he could have turned around at any point during that. Like, there was so many times where he could have came back, you know, because the movie starts off with him in bed with Sharon Stone, and he wakes up and he has that dream, and he tells Sharon Stone that he had that dream about the brunette or whatever. And then he goes to work, and then he sees the commercial for Recall. So he was in this reality, and he realized by going to Recall that he was supposed to do something. Like, he was stuck in this life of getting up every day and going to work and coming home and marrying Sharon Stone, and they erased his memory. So when he went into Recall and he took the trip to Mars, it all started to come back, and that's what they didn't want. They didn't want him to have total recall, because if he had total recall, he would go all the way to the end with it, and that's what he did. Like, they wanted him in bed having the same nightmare about Mars over and over again, the dream about the brunette, you know, and just forgetting about it, getting up the next day and going to work, and just living his life. But he went into Recall, and he realized that he actually had been to Mars before, and he actually had a very specific purpose or a destiny for being there, and that was to save the planet, save the people on Mars that were being suppressed, because the people that were running Mars were controlling the population through the supply of oxygen. They were telling everybody that the atmosphere was bad, so everybody had to live underneath a bubble. And they believed it, because that's what the masses told them. But in reality, the people that were running the show were too afraid to start the reactor. They were too afraid to even do any of that stuff, because it was left by aliens in the pyramid mines on Mars. They put the reactor there. Their handprint was on the reactor button, and everybody, once they saw that, they abandoned the mines. They left it. They said, we're not going to mess with this. Leave it the way it is. And then they realized that the atmosphere was bad. They could build a bubble, a dome, and put people under the dome, but they had total control over the oxygen supply, and they were just running with it because nobody was going into the pyramid mines to start the reactor. And that's what Schwarzenegger did. But he could have left at any time, and he had a lot of temptations. He had a good job, he had a beautiful wife, and you know, and they try to get him to turn around many times. They try to get him on the team many times, and he refused it. And at the end of the movie, he gets the girl, saves the day, saves Mars. And so it's a really good movie, and it makes you think. You know, sometimes, you know, you wake up, you know, I know there's a lot of people out here that feel like they do have a destiny. They feel like they have a purpose for being here. And the whole point with 666 is to not believe the masses, to not believe what people in power are telling you. It's to go your own way, to do your own thing, to see what works for you. All right, everyone. It's been fun. I didn't think the video was going to be this long, but it ended up being this long. So have a good day. Enjoy, and I'll see you guys later.